All right, let's dive into something pretty incredible today. We're going to look at a single piece of writing that, according to our source, has had a bigger impact on the history of the Western world than almost anything else. We're not talking about a treaty or some famous philosophy book. We're talking about a letter, and its influence is just staggering.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. Let's start with this massive claim from a literary giant, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. He called this text the profoundest piece of writing in existence. Now just think about that. This is a guy who knew everything about literature, philosophy, you name it. For him to put this one document above everything else, well, that's saying something.
So that immediately makes you wonder, right? What letter could possibly be that powerful, that deep, that it could earn a title like that? What document has had such a quiet but absolutely world-shaking influence for centuries?
Well, the answer is the Apostle Paul's letter to the Romans. Yep, a letter, tucked away in the Christian New Testament, written to a small community of believers in the heart of the Roman Empire almost 2,000 years ago. Now, if you happen to open up a New Testament, Romans is the very first letter you're going to find right after the four Gospels. But here's a fun fact. It wasn't the first letter Paul actually wrote, not by a long shot. So why does it get the leadoff spot?
And this is what's so fascinating. The early church decided to organize these letters not by when they were written, but by their importance. And Romans got put at the very beginning because it's seen as the cornerstone. It systematically lays out all the big, foundational ideas of the Christian faith. In a way, everything else that follows just builds on what's established right here in this one letter.
And this idea of it being a cornerstone isn't just some abstract theological concept. According to our source material from Martyn Lloyd-Jones, this one book has acted like a spiritual trigger time and time again, sparking revolutions, both personal and cultural, at these critical moments in history. It just keeps showing up. And you can see this incredible domino effect right here. It's a chain reaction that stretches across centuries. Someone has a direct personal encounter with the ideas in Romans, and it completely transforms them. And through them, it transforms the entire world around them. It's an unbelievable pattern. So our first stop is way back in the 4th century with St. Augustine. This guy was a genius, a rock star professor of rhetoric, but his personal life was a total mess. He was brilliant, but he was also deeply conflicted and unhappy. Then one day, sitting in a garden in turmoil, he hears a child's voice chanting, "Take up and read." He opens the book next to him, a copy of Paul's letters, and his eyes fall on this line from Romans 13. And bam, the words hit him like a lightning bolt. That was the moment of his conversion. And later, it was his deep, deep understanding of Romans that gave him the theological firepower to defeat a major heresy that was threatening to derail the early church. Okay, now let's fast forward more than 1,000 years. We've got a German monk, Martin Luther, and he's prepping his lectures for his theology students. And the book that he's been assigned to teach, you guessed it, the Epistle to the Romans. So as Luther is digging into the text, this one core idea, that a person is made right with God by faith, and by faith alone, just completely explodes in his mind. It was a life-altering revelation that became the central pillar, the rocket fuel, for the entire Protestant Reformation. It literally reshaped the map of the Western world. The pattern just keeps going. Now we're in 18th century England with a man named John Wesley. He was a devout preacher, working incredibly hard, but he felt like a total failure. He knew all the right things in his head, but he felt absolutely nothing in his heart. And one night, totally discouraged, he reluctantly dragged himself to this little meeting. And at that meeting, somebody was reading from Martin Luther's commentary on the book of Romans. As Wesley listened, he famously wrote that he felt his heart strangely warmed. In that moment, he got the assurance he had been desperately missing his whole life. And that experience turned him into one of the most powerful evangelists in history, sparking a massive spiritual revival. So after seeing all this incredible historical impact, you've got to ask the question, what kind of person could write something with this much intellectual power, this much spiritual depth? Who was the man behind the letter? The author was the Apostle Paul. And look, even secular historians have to admit, the guy had some serious intellectual horsepower. He's been included in lecture series on the masterminds of the ages because his logic, his reasoning, his ability to build an argument, it was just off the charts. He was, simply put, a genius. But what's really fascinating about Paul isn't just that he was smart. It's his unique resume. Think about it.
He was at the dead center of the three great cultures of his day. He was a top-tier expert in Jewish law, he was a freeborn Roman citizen with all the rights that came with it, and he was steeped in Greek culture and philosophy. It's an almost impossibly perfect combination for one person to have.
And here's why that resume was so crucial for his mission. His Jewish expertise meant he could argue from the scriptures and defend the new faith against its earliest critics. But his Roman and Greek background gave him the cultural keys to unlock the entire non-Jewish world. He could speak their language, understand their worldview. He was perfectly equipped.
So this whole story about Paul, it leads us to a really practical and important principle for our own lives. What's the relationship between faith and our natural abilities? Our personalities, our skills, our backgrounds. Is the idea that once you have faith, all the stuff that makes you you suddenly doesn't matter? Does the Spirit just kind of bulldoze over your personality and your talents and turn you into some generic cookie-cutter person? No! Paul's life screams the complete opposite. The message is that our natural gifts, our talents, they aren't erased. They're seen as gifts from God. Now, they're not for us to brag about, but they are meant to be controlled, energized, and directed by the Spirit for something much bigger. Paul's brilliant mind wasn't shut down, it was ignited. I love this idea. God doesn't make copies, he uses originals. All your specific personality quirks, your unique background, the things you're passionate about and good at, that's not junk to be gotten rid of. That's the exact raw material, the very toolkit that God is prepared to use.
And that leaves us with this final thought. When you look at how Paul's entire life, his culture, his education, his citizenship, was the perfect preparation for his unique mission, we can kind of turn that question on ourselves. What's the unique combination of gifts and background that you've been given? And how might that be the perfect preparation for a purpose you have yet to fully discover?